Cinema EOS C50, this is the third Cinema EOS camera we've seen in just over a year. From June 2024 to the end of 2025, Canon has spent a year and a half rebuilding the entire Cinema EOS product ecosystem. Now, the C50, as the most accessible model in the entire Cinema EOS range, has this ambiguous relationship with the R6 Mark III, which inevitably makes us wonder what exactly is the difference between these two cameras. What you must know is that both the R6 Mark III and the C50 use exactly the same sensor, so in theory, whether in terms of recording specifications or actual performance, these two cameras should be identical. In fact, if you want to see sample footage, you can simply go and watch the episode on the R6 Mark III. But in reality, it doesn't seem to be quite that straightforward. When shooting in RAW, the dynamic range results of the C50 and the R6 Mark III are indeed extremely close. You could say that in this mode, the two cameras are exactly the same. When we enable XFAVC 4K compression encoding with noise reduction turned off, the dynamic range results still don't change much. However, by default, noise reduction is enabled in the CP settings, and in this case, you'll notice that the C50's dynamic range appears to be a full stop higher than that of the R6 Mark III. This result is already almost identical to what we achieved previously by manually applying noise reduction to RAW footage and then downscaling to 4K. This perhaps also proves that the in-camera noise reduction methods of the C50 and R6 Mark III, or at least the degree of noise reduction, are not the same. In real-world shooting tests, as we mentioned in our previous episode, the noise reduction on the R6 Mark III is extremely restrained. Whereas on the C50, although the noise reduction appears to have a somewhat greater impact on dynamic range, it doesn't seem to result in particularly noticeable loss of texture detail in the crying face chart. Just like with the R6 Mark III, if you find that at ISO 4000 or 5000, the overall impact and noise reduction on texture is unacceptable to you, then simply avoid using such high ISO settings. In fact, with the 50, there's really no need for you to use such high ISO values anyway. From a practical point of view, I still recommend that you stick with the default settings. They won't have any negative impact on your images and will even help save you some work in post-production. As noted in our R6 Mark III review, tests show forced basic in-camera noise reduction at ISO 1600, 3200 and 12800. For the R6 Mark III, this restrained reduction provides more flexibility for exposure tweaks. As for the C50, when we're dealing with low light situations, if it already looks underexposed at ISO 800, or let's say the exposure isn't quite enough, we don't need to do what we would with the R6 Mark III. It's actually the same as with the C400 and C80. The C50 now also has an independent dual native ISO that can be freely switched between two settings, so we can simply switch to the base ISO 6400 and then lower the ISO to 1600 or 3200 for use. You can have a look. Under this kind of operation, the overall cleanliness of the shadows is noticeably better compared to simply increasing the ISO from the base ISO. The difference is really quite significant. This is a professional feature unique to Cinema EOS and exclusive to the C50. And if you still feel your exposure isn't enough at base ISO 6400, you can confidently push it up another stop to 12800 if needed. Within this range, we can still achieve a fairly clean image, or at least after some simple processing, obtain a relatively clean result. Of course, we're currently watching this program on an online platform, and after the platform's compression, even if I don't apply any noise reduction, you probably won't notice much noise. So really, you can just make your choice based on your own practical needs. In short, for the C50, whether at base ISO 800 or base ISO 6400, the entire range from 1250 to 12800 provides you with a reliable safety net when dealing with low light conditions. But there is one thing you need to be aware of. Switching the base ISO not only changes the brightness of the image, but also resets the distribution of the dynamic range. And a base ISO 6400, setting the ISO to 1600 won't give you any extra highlight stops. On the contrary, it will actually reduce the highlight range by about 2 stops compared to the dynamic range distribution at base ISO 6400. So when you're dealing with high contrast scenes in daylight, don't follow the traditional EI rules and assume that ISO 1600 at base ISO 6400 will increase your highlight stops and so on. This point is extremely important. Now, in the recovery tests, there is actually a certain difference between the two cameras. This difference, however, does not exist in terms of highlight recovery performance. On this point, both cameras perform identically. Where the difference lies is in the shadow recovery tests. In the segment about the R6 we also showed that when the R6 starts to display rather obvious red noise at -2 or -3 EV, the C50's performance is much more stable. Of course, there is still some noise as you would expect, but it doesn't have that particularly messy and intrusive red cast that makes the image feel dirty. And that's not all. Under standard exposure, you can also see a difference in the basic color profiles between the C50 and the R6 The R6 seems to have a slightly more reddish tone, while the C50 is overall more neutral. You can notice this difference even more clearly in outdoor environments. I can only say that perhaps you might find the R6's reddish tone a bit more appealing, but as a cinema camera, having sufficiently neutral and realistic colour reproduction is an essential skill or requirement. On this point, personally, I actually lean more towards the C50. In terms of operation, Canon tends to use the overall menu layout to distinguish between the EOS and Cinema EOS series models. We can see that on the C50, when selecting encoding, resolution and frame rate, there's no longer any distinction between so-called fine and normal settings. In the current menu, all the 4K compression codecs you can select are equivalent to the fine setting on the R6 This mode only switches to line skipping sampling when you select 100 or 120 frames per second in the high frame rate settings. In fact, this also meets the more straightforward needs of professional users. Here, we did notice another difference. When the C500 is set to crop to S35 mode, there is still a RAW option available, whereas on the R6 once you crop to S35, you can no longer record RAW video. Of course, this might not really matter to you. However, during the readout tests, we were quite surprised to find that the C500, when in S35 mode, has an overall readout speed that is almost identical to that in full-frame mode, or at least the difference is minimal. In other words, cropping does not actually increase the overall readout speed. At the same time, in terms of dynamic range performance, the S35 mode actually surpasses the full-frame mode, which is a test result we've never encountered or seen before. Even when using the default 4K compressed codec, the C500 achieved an astonishing result of SR equal to 15.1 and SR equal to 14.2. This is the highest result we've seen among all Canon models we've tested so far. At this point, the C500 is able to deliver an exceptionally clean performance in the shadows, making any noise reduction operation entirely superfluous. And this state is not achieved through the usual DC RAW blending, nor DGO, nor even more aggressive noise reduction. All of this comes from the C500, enabling the sensor's 14-bit readout mode in S35 mode. At this point, the sensor is operating in exactly the same state as it does in still photography mode, and the price you pay is the loss of the ability to shoot at 100 or 120 frames per second. In fact, Canon could easily switch the readout mode back to 12-bit, restoring the ability to record at 120 frames per second. This really is something that could be enabled through a simple firmware update. As of the release of this episode, the C500 is the first camera to feature this capability. At this moment, when your telephoto lens isn't quite enough, rather than crop in and enlarging the image from the full-frame 7K RAW, it's actually better to switch straight to S35 mode. The resulting image quality is superior. This applies to all compressed codecs as well. It's a universal principle. Judging by its current performance, the C500's S35 full-bit readout mode truly offers a 100% lossless extension of your field of view. It's as if you're carrying a 1.5 times teleconverter with you at all times, but without any reduction in aperture. This really took us by surprise. This is also the biggest difference between the C500 and the R63, and it's made us even more optimistic about Canon's future offerings. So perhaps in S35 mode, we might be able to get a cropped 3x2 or 4x3 open gate format that can achieve 50 or 60 frames per second. For me, compared to the full frame OG, which only does 30 frames per second, this could actually be more useful. At this point, the other professional features on the C500 body don't seem quite as impressive anymore. Of course, we also have to emphasize that the uncropped 4K 120, which is available on both the C500 and the R63, is still line-skipped sampling. Even so, it's definitely better to have this feature than not, and it's currently a very, very important competitive advantage for the C500. Apart from that, on the C500, you'll also easily notice features like the XLR audio module handle and the timecode interface. These two functions are extremely practical for professional production, and they've now been included as well. As for the C500, in terms of exterior design, aside from adding more shortcut buttons and additional quarter-inch screw holes, it is finally done away with that baffling positioning screw hole on the bottom of the previous C70. This is actually quite important for safety and professional use. Also, the independent built-in fan enables the C500 to record indefinitely under all settings with complete peace of mind, a must-have for any professional model. So by now, you should have a clear understanding of the relationship between the C500 and the R63. It's a bit like the relationship between the R5 and the R5C, or the A7S III and the FX3, but it's obvious that the C500 is by no means a perfect machine. The lack of mechanical sensor stabilization is actually a highly controversial feature when it comes to the C500. On the one hand, a sensor that is completely locked in place can, when faced with intense movement or impact, guarantee zero displacement of the sensor 100%. This is something that sensors with stabilization cannot ensure, even when the stabilization is switched off. That's why almost all large-scale cinema cameras do not have sensor shift stabilization. But looking at it from another angle, do the target users of the C500 really find themselves working under such extremely demanding conditions? That's something we need to question. For most standard car-mounted shooting scenarios that aren't particularly intense, in fact, cameras like the FX3, which have mechanical stabilization, are more than up to the task. From my personal perspective, perhaps Canon should focus more on the genuine needs of its user base in this regard, and it would be better to add a mechanical stabilization feature to the C500. But in any case, this really can't be considered a flaw or shortcoming of the C500. It's just a personal hope and expectation of mine. And as for the rest, it's mostly the same old story, Canon showing off its traditional strengths, really. For example, the C500 currently doesn't actually have a proper custom LUT function. When you register a look file, the image displayed by that look file will only avoid being baked into the footage if you're shooting in RAW. If you shoot in XFAV, however, personalized monitoring and log footage can't coexist. Now, I have to admit here, Canon's brand new 709 LUT is absolutely outstanding. You can now choose it on the C400, R5 Mark II, C80, and now the C500 as well, and Canon has finally made this LUT available for download. But after mentioning all these professional advantages, not being able to offer a custom LUT function does seem a bit hard to justify for the C500. Similarly, just like the C80, the C500 also doesn't have a LUT when you're playing back footage. It's grey, it's log. To be honest, for a camera with this professional positioning, this is really quite an absurd omission. But what's fortunate is this. What I can tell everyone is that in December, Canon will be releasing an entirely new firmware update. At the moment, the C500V has only just been launched, so it's not included in this round of firmware updates, but I reckon that day shouldn't be too far off. Let's hope Canon's engineers can burn the midnight oil a bit more on this matter. So, when it came to the R6 Mark III, we talked a bit about the 45mm f1.2. Now, with the C50, I'd also like to chat with you a bit more about Canon's optical assets. For professional video users, lenses aren't just about being sharp. On top of modern optical quality, we also use the different imaging styles of lenses as our paintbrush, employing various visual effects to offer audiences a more diverse and immersive experience. Personally, I really enjoy using FD lenses on Canon cameras. Canon's color rendering is already outstanding when it comes to orange and red tones, and when paired with the FD's charming orange-red flares, you can truly feel that special sensation of using original lenses with original bodies. At the same time, when it comes to the EF lens group, which actually isn't that far removed from us, for example the EF 35mm f1.4L or the EF 85mm f1.4L, one is sufficiently rich and creamy, while the latter, as one of the later EF lenses, is a rare large aperture prime lens with IS stabilization. At the same time, by doing this and using an adapter, you can also make up for the lack of built-in ND in the camera. Canon themselves actually offer an adapter with a built-in ND filter. In short, whether it's because you need a particular optical style or simply because you think RF lenses are just too expensive, I actually believe that in this day and age, the EOS system is one of the rare few with such a vast accumulation of lenses. This gives the EOS system as a whole an enormous amount of versatility and playability. So perhaps you're still wondering whether you should choose the C50 or the R63. In fact, this question couldn't be simpler. Just ask yourself whether you actually take photos. If photography is what you do most, then don't even hesitate. Just go for the R63. But if you're purely all in on shooting video, right, then it's the C50. So in short, with the C50, it really just depends on how high, how extreme, and how pure your requirements are for video performance. Now, coming back to the R63, its overall video specs are actually more than sufficient for most people. The value of the Cinema EOS really lies in this point, so the C50 must inevitably become an even more dedicated tool for video production. It seems Canon is also telling you with the C50 that front illuminated, back illuminated, and stacked sensors are really just different types of sensor structures, and we can't simply use them to judge a product's performance as better or worse. Alright, that's all for this episode. If you found this episode helpful, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to us. See you next time.